Born into a thriving pride deep within the Sabi sands, Rasta opened his eyes to a world of golden grasslands and the distant echoes of roaring kings. His mother, a vigilant and experienced lioness, nurtured him alongside his siblings, ensuring they learned the ways of survival early. The pride was ruled by dominant males, their thick dark manes symbolizing their authority and strength. Among his siblings, Rasta was different, his frame sturdy, his instincts sharp. Yet, despite his natural strength, the world around him was unforgiving. The plains were filled with threats, hyenas prowling in the darkness, rival males waiting for their chance to overthrow the pride, and the constant struggle for food in a land where only the strongest survived. His early days were spent playing among the cubs, unaware that every pounce, every playful bite was preparing him for the brutal life ahead. As he grew, so did his understanding of the unspoken rules of the wild. The pride's males, though protective, were ruthless in maintaining their dominance. Any sign of weakness meant exile or death. The day came when the winds carried an unfamiliar scent, strangers, rogue males encroaching upon the pride's territory. A battle ensued, and the dominant males, overwhelmed, fought with ferocity. The pride was shattered. The males who survived fled, leaving the young ones vulnerable. Rasta watched as the world he knew collapsed. He was still too young to fight, but the lesson was clear. No kingdom was eternal, and one day he would have to claim his own. Time passed, and the once playful cub had transformed into a young male, his body lean yet powerful. His mane had begun to darken, marking his transition into adulthood. But with maturity came the inevitable: exile. The dominant males, fearing competition, would not allow him and his brothers to stay. They were forced to leave, cast out into the merciless unknown where only the strongest survived. The savannah was no longer home, it was a battleground. With no pride to protect them and no lionesses to hunt for them, Rasta and his brothers faced the harsh reality of survival. Hunger gnawed at their bellies, and every meal was a test of endurance and strategy. They scavenged what they could, stole from hyenas when possible, and attempted to hunt, though their skills were unrefined. Rasta felt the weight of exile pressing down on him. The life of a rogue lion was brutal, filled with uncertainty and constant danger. Every night, the distant roars of stronger males reminded him of his place. He was nothing yet, just another outcast fighting to stay alive. But deep inside, the fire of ambition burned. He refused to be a forgotten shadow in the wild. He had seen what power meant, what it took to rule. This exile was not the end, it was the beginning. He would not simply survive, he would conquer. The journey had begun. Hello guys, if you like our stories and haven't subscribed yet, support our work and subscribe to the channel to help us. The vast wilderness stretched endlessly before him, a land of opportunity and peril. Though his heart burned with ambition, doubt gnawed at the edges of his resolve. The life of an outcast was not one of glory, but of suffering. Every failed hunt weakened him. Every encounter with a rival tested his endurance. The nights were long, filled with hunger and uncertainty, and for the first time he questioned his path. He was not yet a king, not yet a conqueror. He was merely a young lion cast into the unknown, unproven and unwanted. The roars of dominant males echoed across the plains, reminders that he was not strong enough, not yet worthy to challenge them. His brothers were his only allies, yet even they knew that survival was a brutal contest. The temptation to hide in the shadows of the wild was strong. He could scavenge, live on the edges of others' territories, avoid conflict, and simply exist. But existence was not enough. He had seen what happened to the weak: starvation, exile, death. There was no place in the savannah for a lion who did not fight for his future. The fear of failure held him back, but the greater fear of insignificance pushed him forward. He had been born into strength. He would not let his story end in obscurity. Through the hardship of exile, Rasta and his brothers grew into formidable hunters. Their failures sharpened them. Their hunger made them relentless. In the wild, only the strong survived, and with each passing day, they inched closer to dominance. It was during this time that Rasta encountered Mr. T, his brother and his greatest rival. Among the exiled lions, Mr. T stood apart, not only in strength, but in sheer brutality. He had embraced the law of the wild with a ferocity unmatched, knowing that compassion had no place in the world they sought to rule. Together, they forged an unbreakable bond, joined by their shared past and their hunger for power. They were not alone. Other young exiles driven by the same ambition joined them. A coalition was born, and with it a new force emerged in the savannah. Rasta learned quickly. He watched Mr. T's ruthlessness, his ability to strike fear into rivals and allies alike. Power was not given, it was taken. The weak did not inherit the land. The strong seized it. Under the guidance of their own experience, they became more than mere survivors. They became warriors, a force unlike any the region had seen before. Their time as outcasts was coming to an end. Soon, the world would know their names. The days of wandering without purpose had ended. Rasta and his coalition were no longer starving exiles. They were warriors honed by hardship. Their bodies, once lean from hunger, had grown into masses of muscle and power. Their manes darkened with maturity, signaling their readiness to challenge the kings of the land. They moved with purpose, no longer avoiding conflict but seeking it. The scent of a pride, the fresh tracks of rival males, these were no longer threats but invitations. Each encounter was a test of their strength, and with every battle their legend grew. The first true challenge came when they set their sights on a pride ruled by two aging males. The brothers had grown complacent, confident in their dominance, unaware that the world had already moved against them. Rasta and his coalition struck with fury, descending upon the pride like a storm. The battle was violent, filled with snarls and the clash of claws against flesh. The old kings fought desperately, but they were outnumbered, outmatched. One fell beneath their combined assault, his throat crushed by relentless jaws. The other fled, his legacy shattered. The pride was theirs. The lionesses, at first hesitant, submitted to their new rulers. The cubs sired by the fallen kings were not spared. Rasta and his brothers ensured that no bloodline but their own would remain. It was a harsh law, but an unbreakable one. For the first time, Rasta tasted true power. He was no longer an exile, no longer just another rogue. He had crossed the threshold from a nameless wanderer to a ruler of the wild, and he was just beginning. With their first victory came more challenges. Holding power was as dangerous as seizing it. The savannah was restless, filled with rivals who had watched their rise with growing unease. Other coalitions, strong and ambitious, waited for the moment to strike. Rasta and his brothers expanded their territory, pushing into lands once controlled by weaker males. Every new pride they conquered strengthened their grip on the region. The name Mapogo began to spread like wildfire, whispered in both fear and admiration. But power had its price. The coalition was strong, but unity was fragile. Mr. T, once Rasta's greatest ally, became something more, his most dangerous rival. Where Rasta sought control through strategy, Mr. T ruled with savagery. His methods were brutal, his dominance enforced through sheer terror. The brothers clashed, their bond tested by ambition. They were a force together, but tension simmered beneath the surface. Enemies lurked in the shadows. Other coalitions, sensing weakness in their growing pride, circled like vultures. The balance of power was shifting, and the war for ultimate dominance had only begun. Rasta stood at the center of it all, a king forged by battle, surrounded by allies who could one day become enemies. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: he would not fall easily. The Mapogo Coalition was no longer just a rising force. They were the undisputed rulers of the land. Their territory stretched wider than any coalition before them, their influence shaping the savannah itself. Every roar that echoed through the night was a declaration of power, a warning to those who dared challenge them. Rasta had proven himself not just as a warrior but as a king. He moved with confidence, his body scarred by countless battles, each mark a testament to his dominance. The prides under his rule flourished, the lionesses submitting to their new masters, ensuring that the next generation carried the bloodline of the Mapogo. Yet, even as the coalition reigned supreme, Rasta could feel the shifting winds of change. The land they had conquered was vast, but no kingdom remained unchallenged forever. Young males were growing stronger in the shadows, their eyes filled with the same hunger he once carried. And within his own ranks, the bonds that held them together began to fray. Mr. T had grown more violent, his rule steeped in blood and fear. While Rasta believed in strength, he knew that brute force alone could not sustain an empire. The tension between them had turned into a silent war, an unspoken battle for control. They had built this kingdom together, but only one would truly rule it. The greatest threat, however, did not come from within. Across the borders of their domain, whispers of a new coalition spread. A band of younger, powerful males had gathered, their numbers growing, their ambition undeniable. They were watching, waiting, preparing. The same hunger that had driven Rasta and his brothers now burned in these challengers. The Mapogo were kings, but kings were always hunted. The challenge came under the scorching sun, the land trembling with the weight of an inevitable war. The rival coalition had arrived, strong, determined, and ready to claim the throne. They were younger, their muscles fresh with the strength of those who had not yet been broken by battle. Rasta and his brothers met them head-on. The war that followed shook the land, a clash of titans that sent ripples through the entire savannah. Roars filled the air, teeth sank into flesh, and the dry earth was stained with blood. The fight was unlike any before. The Mapogo had crushed countless rivals, but these challengers fought with the desperation of those who had nothing to lose. One by one, the balance of power began to shift. Rasta saw his brothers wounded, their once unstoppable force beginning to crumble. Then, the unthinkable happened. Mr. T, the lion who had once stood beside him as an unbreakable pillar of strength, was forced into retreat. The coalition was breaking. For the first time, Rasta felt the weight of mortality press against him. He fought with everything he had, his body moving with the instinct of a warrior who refused to fall. He had built this empire with his own blood. He would not surrender it. But the odds had turned against him. A moment of weakness, a slip. Claws tore into him, teeth sank deep. The pain was sharp, but the realization was sharper. He was losing. The war he had fought to prevent had found him, and it was taking everything from him. The savannah, once his kingdom, now belonged to those who had fought harder, who had come stronger. The great king had been wounded beyond recovery. His time was slipping away. The end was near. The dust settled over the battlefield, the echoes of battle fading into the vast expanse of the savannah. Rasta, once the conqueror, now lay wounded, his breath heavy, his body failing him. The land he had ruled, the prides he had claimed, the empire he had built, all of it was slipping from his grasp. The rival coalition, their victory secured, did not hesitate to take what was now theirs. The lionesses, bound by the laws of survival, would submit to new rulers. The Mapogo, once unbreakable, had been scattered, some dead, others fleeing into exile. The invincible force had finally met its reckoning. Yet even in the face of defeat, Rasta had won something greater than territory. He had carved his name into the bones of history. The reign of the Mapogo was not just a fleeting moment, it was a legend that would be told long after he was gone. No lion, no coalition had ever ruled with such dominance, such ferocity. They had not just conquered, they had changed the very balance of the wild. As he lay there, his body weak but his spirit unbroken, he knew that his legacy would never fade. He had fought, he had ruled, and though his time had come to an end, the savannah would forever remember the name of Rasta, the lion who had reigned as a god of war. The world he had known moved on without him. The young rulers who had taken his place roared over the land, marking their newfound power. The prides continued, the cycle of dominance repeating as it always had. No king ruled forever. Rasta had always known this. But his story did not end in silence. The whispers of the Mapogo's reign still echoed across the wild. The scars left upon the land by their rule could not be erased. The lions who now held power did so with the knowledge that they stood upon the ashes of an empire built through blood and war. Rasta, once a name spoken in fear, had become something greater, an immortal figure in the history of the savannah. Even as his body grew weaker, his legend only grew stronger. The lions who had seen his rise and fall would never forget. He had once been an outcast, wandering in exile, uncertain of his place in the world. He had fought to survive, fought to rise, and in the end had built something that would never be forgotten. His time as a king had ended, but his reign would never truly die. The sun dipped low over the savannah, painting the land in hues of gold and crimson. The world moved forward, as it always did, but the echoes of Rasta's reign lingered. Though he had fallen, his name was whispered among the lions who still roamed the plains. The young males who dared to challenge the laws of the wild spoke of him as both a warning and an inspiration. He had not merely been a ruler, he had been a force of nature. His dominance had reshaped the land, his victories had rewritten the hierarchy of power. Even in death he lived on, carried in the instincts of every lion that sought to rise. His cubs, scattered yet strong, bore his blood, ensuring that his lineage would endure. The Mapogo had once been feared, their rule unmatched. Now they were legends, their legacy woven into the very fabric of the wild. The rival coalition that had overthrown them had claimed their throne, but they too would one day face the same fate. The savannah did not favor kings. It only rewarded those strong enough to take what they desired. And so, Rasta lived on, not in flesh, but in myth. His story, a tale of power, ambition, and the unforgiving law of the wild, would be passed down for generations. He had risen from exile, built an empire, and fought to the very end. No lion ruled forever, but some, like Rasta, never truly died. Seasons passed, the prides changed hands, new coalitions rose and fell. The scars of the battles Rasta had fought faded from the land, but not from memory. His legend had become more than just a story. It had become a lesson. Young lions, cast into exile just as he once was, looked to his tale for guidance. Some sought to emulate his strength, to build their own empires. Others feared the fate that had awaited him, knowing that power alone was never enough. The savannah remained as it had always been, a land ruled by strength, dictated by the will to survive. But Rasta had proven that a lion could be more than just another name in the endless cycle of rise and fall. He had become a symbol of what it meant to seize destiny with blood and claw. His roar no longer echoed across the plains, but his presence remained. In every challenge for dominance, in every young male who dreamed of conquest, in every coalition that sought to rule, his legacy endured. Rasta had not just lived, he had changed the world around him. And in the end, that was the true mark of a king. Hello guys, if you like our stories and haven't subscribed yet, support our work and subscribe to the channel to help us.